The chandeliers of Lady Ashcombe's ballroom glittered like suspended constellations, each crystal catching the waltz's golden rhythm as if the night itself wished to dazzle her guests into forgetting their own uncertainties. Yet nothing in that radiant hall could distract the young woman standing near the orchestra's dais, hands clasped too tightly, breath held a shade too long. She had once been adored here, praised for her gentle wit, admired for her poise, blessed by the approving murmurs of mothers searching for suitable brides for their sons. Tonight, however, every polished floorboard seemed to tilt beneath her feet, as if forewarning the humiliation that moved toward her in well-tailored boots and a smirk sharpened for cruelty. Her former suitor cut through the crowd with the confidence of a man used to being admired, though the fashionable gentleman carried a secret desperation under his impeccable waistcoat. Debts coiled around his ankles like invisible chains, but he masked them with charm, laughter, and the careless arrogance of youth. He reached her with a shallow bow meant more for spectacle than respect, and she knew, by the curl of his lip, by the relish in his eyes, that mercy would not be offered tonight. "My dear," he said, tone bright enough to draw nearby attention, "I fear our arrangement must find its natural conclusion." His voice carried just enough for whispers to begin their hungry crawl. She felt the blood drain from her cheeks, though she kept her chin lifted in the way her mother once taught her, for dignity was the only armor available to women who could not duel with swords. "I beg your pardon?" she asked, quiet but steady. He laughed lightly, as if humoring a child. "Surely you suspected this. Your charms are fine enough, but marriage, my sweet, marriage rises or falls upon calculation, and I cannot be expected to bind myself where the advantages are insufficient." A ripple of amusement traveled through the onlookers. Someone stifled a gasp. Someone else whispered her name with pity disguised as fascination. The orchestra's violin swelled, a cruel contrast to the sharp ache behind her ribs. "You would have regretted marrying me anyway," he added, with a flamboyant shrug that invited the crowd to share his jest. "And I dare say you shall regret whatever poor match you make next." For one fleeting heartbeat, her composure faltered. A tear threatened, not from heartbreak. She saw now how shallow he had always been, but from the sting of public disgrace. She swallowed it back, refusing to let it fall. A lady might bend beneath humiliation, but she must never break where society could see. Then the murmurs shifted, rustling through the hall like a change in wind. The dancers slowed. Heads turned, not toward her suitor but behind her, toward the tall figure who had not been expected to attend any ball, much less witness this humiliation. The Duke of Ravensfield stood at the edge of the crowd, broad-shouldered, impeccably dressed, face carved in stillness. His presence alone subdued the laughter. Even her former suitor straightened, unease flickering beneath his affected sophistication. The Duke was a man spoken of in half-truths and embellished fears. Reclusive, wealthy beyond imagining, rumored to carry the shadow of some family curse. He rarely attended public gatherings, preferring the solitude of his estates to London's glittering scrutiny. Yet here he was, his gaze fixed on her with an intensity that made the room feel smaller. He crossed to her without haste, though every step commanded attention. When he reached her, he bowed, not deeply, but with perfect formality, as though she were a queen wrongfully insulted. "Miss," he said, voice calm and unadorned by theatrics, "would you allow me the honor of escorting you away from this spectacle?" Spectacle. The word pierced the air with a quiet authority that made the onlookers shrink back. Her former suitor bristled, but the Duke did not spare him a glance. Instead, he extended a gloved hand, neither demanding nor pleading, merely offering dignity where it had been stripped from her. She hesitated. Not because she doubted him. How could she doubt what felt like a lifeline tossed across a sea of mockery? But because the suddenness of his intervention felt unreal, like a scene from a tale whispered by governesses to lonely children. Seeing her uncertainty, the Duke's expression softened almost imperceptibly. "You have been wronged," he said, low enough that only she could hear. "Allow me to restore your comfort, if nothing else." Something fragile inside her steadied. She placed her hand in his. His grasp was firm without presumption, guiding her through the parted crowd with a protective grace that drew even deeper whispers. But now the whispers were different. Curiosity sharpened by fear, astonishment tinged with envy. "They say he is cold as winter," someone murmured. "They say he has no heart," said another. They say his fortune could rebuild half of England. Her former suitor watched them leave with a smirk of disbelief, mistaking the Duke's intervention for a passing chivalric whim. "She will regret it," he muttered to his companions. "He is not a man to be loved. She will learn that soon enough." Outside the ballroom, the air felt less heavy, less perfumed, less false. Moonlight spilled across the marble steps, carving silver against the shadows. The Duke released her hand slowly, as if ensuring she could stand on her own before withdrawing. "Forgive my boldness," he said. "Some cruelties should not be endured alone." She drew a steadying breath. "I thank you, Your Grace. I did not expect kindness." A faint, unreadable smile touched his mouth. "Then you have been surrounded by the wrong sort of people." For a moment, neither spoke. The soft clatter of departing carriages echoed from the street beyond, and a distant bell marked the hour. She realized, with a quiet astonishment, that the sting of humiliation had eased, not vanished, but changed, softened by a strange sense of safety in his presence. The Duke stepped back, preparing to take his leave. Yet before he could, a gust of wind carried laughter from the ballroom, the laughter of her ex, sharp and triumphant. She flinched despite herself. The Duke turned toward the sound, his eyes narrowing with a chilling, controlled composure. When he looked back at her, the softness was gone, replaced by something steadier, deeper, almost promising. "Miss," he said, "this is not the end of what occurred tonight." Her breath caught. "What do you mean?" He held her gaze for a long, disquieting heartbeat. "You will learn," he said quietly, "that some men hide secrets not from malice, but from necessity." Before she could speak, a footman opened the door behind them, summoning him away. The Duke inclined his head once, then disappeared into the night, leaving her alone beneath the moon, shaken, restored, and suddenly aware that her life had shifted in a direction she could not yet name. Morning crept into London with a pale, deliberate grace, its light dissolving the remnants of last night's humiliation. She had slept little. Every time her eyes closed, the ballroom returned, the laughter, the whispers, the sting of public dismissal. Yet woven strangely through the ache was the memory of the Duke's steady hand guiding her away, the quiet assurance in his voice, the way society itself had held its breath when he spoke. That memory lingered like a candle stubbornly burning against drafts, defiant in its softness. She descended the stairs of her modest townhouse, expecting nothing more than a quiet breakfast and her mother's concerned glances. Instead, a carriage unlike any she had ever seen stood before the door. It was sleek, dark, emblazoned with a silver crest so finely carved it caught the morning light like a blade. Neighbors peeked through curtains. Servants paused mid-task. A footman in livery as immaculate as a portrait stepped forward and bowed. "Miss," he said with impeccable formality, "His Grace the Duke of Ravensfield requests your presence." Her heart jolted. Requested. Not invited, not summoned. Requested. The distinction felt significant, though she could not say why. With trembling composure, she allowed herself to be assisted into the carriage, its interior lined in velvet so deep it felt like falling into dusk. The ride through London felt unreal. Gas lamps still flickered, shopkeepers were only just sweeping their thresholds, and yet here she sat, encased in a world of wealth so quiet it felt like an enchantment. Her reflection trembled in the polished window, pale, uncertain, a woman on the edge of something she did not yet understand. The Duke's London townhouse rose ahead, austere and magnificent. He waited in the entry hall, hands clasped behind his back, his expression smoothed into something unreadable. She curtsied, he bowed. Formalities completed, he gestured toward a private room. "I hope the early hour does not displease you," he said as he led her through corridors heavy with ancestral portraits. "I am at your disposal, Your Grace," she replied, though her voice held a tremor she prayed he would mistake for cold. Inside the drawing-room, sunlight filtered through tall windows, illuminating shelves of leather-bound volumes and a marble hearth that seemed untouched for years. The Duke motioned for her to sit, yet he remained standing, an elegant monument of restraint. "I wish to speak with you privately," he said. "Last night's incident was unjust, and I fear it may bring consequences you should not bear alone." She clasped her hands in her lap. "You showed me more kindness than I deserved." Something flickered in his gaze. Hurt? Irritation? She could not tell. "No one deserves humiliation," he said. "Least of all one who conducted herself with dignity." She breathed in slowly. "Thank you." A pause stretched between them, thin but taut, as though the next words might unravel something delicate. "I intend to make you an offer," he said finally. "Not rashly, though I concede the timing may suggest otherwise." Her heartbeat quickened. He lowered himself into a chair opposite her, the distance between them closing in a way that felt both intimate and overwhelming. "Miss," he continued, "I propose marriage." The world stilled. Every sound, carriages outside, footsteps in distant halls, the faint ticking of a clock, fell away. She stared at him, unable to mask her shock. "You propose marriage?" she echoed faintly. "Yes." His tone held neither hesitation nor vanity. "You are in a vulnerable position through no fault of your own. Your reputation, though undeservedly stained, can be restored. Mine is impermeable." He paused, as though choosing the next words carefully. "More importantly, I believe a union between us would offer you stability and protection." "And what would it offer you, Your Grace?" she asked, breath unsteady. His jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "Companionship, perhaps, and a partner who is not swayed by society's shallow expectations." She felt her pulse flutter. "You know so little of me." "I know enough," he said gently, "and what I have seen is worthy of respect." The room's air thickened. She searched his face, but he offered no hint of romantic sentiment, no poetic declarations, only the calm sincerity of a man who had weighed his decision thoroughly. Before she could muster a response, he reached into a drawer and removed a velvet box. Opening it, he revealed a ring of extraordinary simplicity, a gold band set with a single luminous stone. "It is not meant to dazzle," he said softly, "only to signify intention." Inside the lid, written in elegant script, "To be respected." Emotions swelled in her throat, unexpected and sharp. Respect. The one thing denied to her last night. "I do not expect an answer this moment," he continued. "Only that you consider my offer with clarity rather than fear." But clarity was impossible when the world had shifted so violently beneath her feet. "Your Grace, the gossip will be unkind. People will say I accepted out of desperation." "They may," he agreed. "But people say many things. I care for none of them." Before she could speak further, the door burst open with a footman's breathless arrival. "Your Grace, the morning papers." The Duke took the newspaper, scanned the front page, and exhaled with controlled fury. He handed it to her. Her former suitor's name appeared amid the columns, boasting, jesting, claiming she had been gratefully rescued by the nearest willing nobleman. Heat rose in her cheeks, mortification renewed. The Duke's voice dropped to a low, unyielding tone. "Your suffering ends now. It was not a promise. It was a vow." He escorted her to the carriage himself, ignoring the startled servants who had never seen him break propriety. As he offered his hand, she felt the weight of something vast rising around them. Scandal, speculation, possibility. "Miss," he said as she stepped onto the carriage stool, "I ask only this. Do not let the laughter of lesser men define your worth." "I shall try," she whispered. He held her gaze, and for the first time, she sensed something warm, something cautiously fragile, beneath the frost of his composure. When the carriage door closed, she felt the truth settle over her with breathtaking clarity. The world would not be the same after today. And neither, it seemed, would she. As the wheels rolled away, she looked back through the window. The Duke stood on the steps, coat stirring in the wind, watching her with an intensity that promised far more than mere protection. Something unnamed flickered in her chest. Then a sudden thought struck her, a terrifying, exhilarating possibility, and the section ends as she breathes the words aloud, barely audible even to herself. "What if I said yes?" The countryside unfurled before her like a tapestry woven from mist and memory, its rolling fields catching the last pale shreds of winter sunlight. The Duke's estate appeared gradually, not as a single house but as a kingdom, its long stone facade stretching across the land with a quiet authority that made her breath catch. Ravensfield Hall was older than some nations, older than half the titled families who now whispered about her engagement. As the carriage approached the great entrance, she felt both impossibly small and strangely chosen, as though stepping into a story larger than her own. The Duke awaited her in the vast entry hall, hands loosely clasped behind his back. Candlelight played along the sharp planes of his face, softening what London always called coldness. His gaze rested on her with an attentiveness that unsettled her, not intrusive, not possessive, but aware, as though he saw the exact weight she carried and silently steadied it. "I trust your journey was comfortable," he said. "It was peaceful," she managed, though her pulse still raced from the grandeur surrounding her. He offered his arm. "Allow me to show you your new home." The tour unfolded like a slow descent into his private world. Gallery after gallery revealed ancestral portraits, stern men with medals, women whose calm expressions hinted at deep reservoirs of endurance. A library stretched further than she could see, its scent of leather and old ink wrapped around her like a solemn embrace. Even the silence here felt richer, layered with history that lingered in corners and whispered from behind doors. But it was not the estate that captured her attention. It was the small things she glimpsed when he thought she was not looking. The way his hand brushed the portrait of a young woman with solemn eyes. The moment he paused at a corridor where the sunlight fell just so, as if remembering something, or someone. There were stories buried within these walls, stories he seemed unwilling to speak of, yet unable to fully conceal. When he led her into a quiet study overlooking the gardens, she felt the shift in him, a softening, a hesitation, as though he had brought her to the threshold of something fragile. "I wished for you to see this room," he said. "It belonged to someone dear to me. My sister." Her breath caught. "She must have been very special." "She was," he replied, voice low. "And I failed to protect her." He said nothing more, yet the ache beneath those words echoed through the room. She wanted to reach out, to offer comfort, but the propriety of their engagement stood like a barrier between them. Instead, she let her silence carry respect rather than intrusion. Dinner that evening unfolded with quiet elegance. The long table, far too large for two, felt almost theatrical, yet the candlelight softened its austerity. He spoke little, but when he did, his words carried intention. He asked about her childhood, her dreams, her fears. He listened in a way no man ever had, wholly, attentively, as though each answer mattered. "You are not required to marry me," he said at one point, setting down his fork with careful deliberation. "If this life feels overwhelming, or if you feel coerced by circumstance, say so plainly." She met his gaze. "I do not feel coerced. I feel unsteady, perhaps, but not unwilling." Something flickered in his eyes, something that might have been hope. After dinner, he offered to show her the West Wing. The corridor here was colder, the walls lined with nautical maps instead of portraits. Names of ships, faded by time, decorated the frames. Some were marked with dates, others bore small black ribbons pinned beside them. She paused before one map. "Did you serve in the Navy, Your Grace?" "No," he said quietly. "But I funded vessels. Volunteers sailed them. Men who believed in defending what we could not afford to lose." "And these ribbons?" she asked gently. "Lives lost," he replied. "Families left behind." The solemnity in his tone pierced her. She could sense his secret becoming clearer, not scandal, but sacrifice. A man who spent his wealth not on indulgence but on redemption. "You did all this quietly," she whispered. "Attention serves no purpose," he answered. "But necessity does." As they continued down the hall, she noticed a door slightly ajar. A dim glow spilled out from within. Curiosity tugged at her, and before she could stop herself, she stepped inside. The room held a massive oak desk strewn with letters, ledgers, and sealed envelopes. She recognized the handwriting on some documents, names of widows, families she knew by association, households rescued from ruin. And at the bottom of a stack lay a ledger listing enormous sums paid over years. War widows, children's pensions, hospital funds. She touched the page lightly. All this, is yours. He stood in the doorway, shadowed by torchlight. It is work that must be done. Nothing more. But why do it alone? She asked softly. He looked at her as though weighing something. Because I have been taught that to open one's heart widely invites loss. And I have lost enough. The honesty struck her like a tremor. Here was a man society called heartless, yet she stood in the center of a room filled with proof of a heart too burdened to reveal itself. You are not what they say, she murmured. They say many things, he replied. Most of them untrue. She approached him slowly, feeling the air between them tighten with unspoken meaning. If I am to be your wife, she said, I hope you will one day trust me with the truths you guard so closely. His breath stilled. Then, with a solemn nod, he answered, Perhaps I already do. For the first time, she felt the dizzying possibility that he did not merely wish to protect her. He might be beginning to need her. The moment stretched, fragile and trembling. Then footsteps echoed in the corridor, hurried, uncertain. A footman appeared, breathless. Your Grace, there is a message from London. Urgent. The Duke's expression hardened. From whom? The footman swallowed. From the gentleman who once courted the lady. A chill ran through her. The Duke's voice dropped to something colder than she had ever heard. What, he asked, does he want now? And in that instant, she understood. Whatever message had arrived carried the power to shatter the fragile peace between them, or forge something stronger in its place. The letter lay on the Duke's desk like a shard of ice, its presence chilling the room long before he broke the seal. She stood near the window, fingers trembling despite her best efforts to appear composed. Outside, dusk rolled across the estate, spreading violet shadows over the gardens, but inside the study the air felt tight, as if every painting, every book, every silent memory was listening. He unfolded the letter slowly. His jaw tightened. A muscle flickered near his temple. She had never seen him lose composure, not even slightly, but now something raw flashed in his eyes before he shuttered it again. It is from him, the Duke said. He did not speak her former suitor's name, as though it were unworthy of breath. He demands a meeting. Private. Tonight. Her heart lurched. Why would he? He gives no reason, the Duke said, which suggests the reason is unsavory. Fear, humiliation, and old shame tangled inside her. You do not have to meet him, she said quietly. He looked at her then, not as a duke, not as a man hiding grief, but as someone who had chosen her and felt that choice threatened. If he believes he can wound you further, I must know how. I will not allow him to wield influence over us. The words settled into the room like a vow. They traveled by carriage to a small coaching inn on the outskirts of the nearest village, a place chosen, she suspected, because gossip rarely bloomed there. Storm clouds pressed low, heavy and bruised, as though waiting to break. When they entered the lamplit dining hall, her former suitor rose from a corner table, dressed well but with edges frayed, collar slightly rumpled, boots unpolished, desperation clinging to him like damp. He bowed with exaggerated politeness. Your Grace. And you, my dear, glowing as ever. The Duke's gaze hardened. Speak your purpose. Her ex smiled thinly. Straight to business. Admirable. He leaned back in his chair, affecting ease. I come with news. Dangerous news for a bride-to-be. But as a gentleman, I thought it best you hear it from me. Her stomach twisted. The Duke stepped closer, placing a steadying hand on the back of her chair, not possessive but protective. Her ex folded his hands. Your Grace, surely you know her family's finances are not what they appear. Her dowry, impoverished. Her connections, weak. And worse, her father's dealings. That will do, the Duke interrupted, voice low and sharp as a drawn blade. But her ex continued, relishing each word. Her father owes substantial sums. Debts, Your Grace. Debts that will fall upon her husband, unless paid before the marriage. I thought you should know what you are walking into. The room spun. She had not known. Her father had hidden it from her. Pride, shame, or a misguided wish to protect her. Her breath caught painfully. The Duke did not look at her. His eyes remained fixed on the man before him, burning with a cold fury that made even the candle flames seem to recede. "You brought this information for leverage," he said, each word measured. "Why?" Her former suitor shrugged. "Perhaps I wish to spare you from making a mistake. Perhaps I wish to salvage her reputation. Or perhaps," he added, smiling cruelly, "I simply wish to see her regret her choices." There it was, the true wound beneath the performance. Not concern. Not dignity. Envy. "You humiliated her publicly," the Duke said. "And now you seek to wound her further by parading her family's misfortunes." "I only tell truths," the man replied. The Duke's voice dropped, quiet as thunder before it breaks. "A truth wielded to injure is a weapon, and I do not suffer men who harm my future Duchess." Something inside her stilled. My future Duchess. As though the debts, the shame, the scandal changed nothing for him. Her ex tilted his head. "You intend to marry her even now?" The Duke did not hesitate. "Yes." The word struck her like warmth after winter. She turned toward him, seeing not a distant nobleman but a man who had chosen loyalty over pride, protection over convenience. Her former suitor's mask slipped, envy twisting his features. "You are a fool," he spat. "All of London knows you hide something. Rumors of madness, of curses, of—" The Duke stepped forward so swiftly the man stumbled back. "If you speak of curses," he said, "let us speak of the curse of a man who cannot keep honor even in his speech." Silence crackled. Even the innkeeper froze behind the counter. "You will cease all discussion of her," the Duke continued. "You will retract your boasts. And you will never again speak her name where gossip may carry it." Her ex scoffed, but fear flickered in his eyes. "If I refuse?" The Duke leaned in slightly, his voice a whisper of steel. "Then I shall show you what a man with nothing to hide, and everything to protect, is capable of." Her former suitor wavered. Pride battled common sense. At last, he snatched his coat and fled into the rising wind, the inn door slamming behind him with a shudder. She exhaled shakily. The Duke turned to her, his expression softening with concern. "I apologize," he said. "You should never have been forced to witness such pettiness." But she shook her head. "No. I am grateful you stood beside me." Stormlight flickered through the windows as thunder murmured across the sky. She felt a shift inside her, dangerous, tender, undeniable. The Duke, sensing it, turned slightly away, as though afraid of revealing too much. "Your father's debts," he said quietly. "Do not trouble yourself. They will be settled." Her breath caught. "You would do that?" "It is already done," he murmured, finally meeting her gaze. "I learned of it earlier today. I had hoped to spare you the grief." Emotion flooded her, overwhelming in its quiet kindness. She stepped closer without thinking, the space between them shrinking until she felt the charged stillness of his breath. "You deserve honesty," he said. "And in time, I will tell you everything, everything I have never told another soul." Her heart beat wildly. "I want to know you," she whispered. "Not the Duke. Not the legend. You." Something broke in his composure. A single unguarded moment, so fleeting she almost doubted it, passed through his eyes. Then thunder cracked overhead, lights flickered, and a servant hurried into the room, breathless. "Your Grace," he said, "a coach has overturned on the North Road. The rider brings word. It concerns someone from your past." The Duke froze. And in his stillness, she saw it, the fear no one believed he could feel. Rain struck the carriage windows like frantic fingertips as they rushed toward the overturned coach on the North Road. The Duke had not spoken since the messenger arrived, but the silence around him was not cold. It was carved from fear so deep it felt ancient. She sat across from him, watching the tension in his jaw, the tight grip of his gloved hands. This was the man society claimed felt nothing, yet here he was, haunted, breath locked in his chest. The carriage jolted to a stop. Lanterns bobbed in the darkness, held by stable boys and a pair of villagers who had dragged the injured to shelter beneath a dripping oak. Mud thickened the air with the scent of earth and storm. The Duke stepped out before the footman could lower the step, striding through the rain as if it were inconsequential. She gathered her courage and followed, skirts heavy with water, hair clinging to her neck. A figure lay on a blanket near the damaged coach, an elderly man with white hair plastered to his temples, blood seeping slowly from his side. The Duke dropped to his knees beside him, and for the first time since she met him, she heard something break in his voice. "Uncle." The dying man opened his eyes with effort. "You came," he rasped. "Thank God." She froze. The Duke's uncle, one of the few remaining members of his family. She had heard whispers he lived far away, tending lands left derelict by war. She had not known he was traveling here. "What happened?" the Duke demanded, his composure slipping like a blade losing its sheath. "The wheel snapped," the uncle gasped. "But that is not why I sought you." His hand trembled as he reached into his coat. The Duke steadied him, and the man drew out a folded paper sealed with wax. "A letter," the uncle whispered. "From your sister. Found only last month. Hidden in a box meant for you." The Duke's breath hitched. She felt the world narrow to a single point. His sister, the one whose portrait hung with such solemn pride, the one whose death had carved a hollow space inside him. The Duke broke the seal with shaking fingers, shielding the paper from the rain. He read silently, eyes moving faster, then slower, then stopping altogether. She watched a storm pass through him, recognition, grief, disbelief, then something like release. "She forgave me," he whispered. "She never blamed me." The uncle smiled faintly. "She loved you, always." And with that final word, the man exhaled his last breath. Rain softened its sound, swallowing it into the storm. The Duke bowed his head over the still form, shoulders trembling once, just once, before he steadied himself. She approached quietly, placing a gentle hand on his arm. "I am so sorry," she murmured. He did not look at her at first. When he did, his eyes were unguarded, bare with sorrow. "I could not protect her," he said. "I believed she died thinking me neglectful, distant, unloving. I carried that guilt every day. Every act of charity, every coin, every choice, I made them trying to atone." She lowered herself beside him, ignoring the cold mud that soaked through her gown. "You loved her. That is what mattered." And she knew it enough to forgive without being asked. The Duke closed his eyes, letting the rain wash his grief into the earth. "All these years, I built my life around penance. I shut out the world so I would never fail anyone so dearly again." Her hand tightened softly on his. "You have not failed me." The words seemed to reach him like distant bells. His gaze shifted, focusing entirely on her, as if seeing her for the first time not as a responsibility, nor a wounded woman needing protection, but as someone capable of standing beside him, sharing the weight he had carried alone. "We should return," he said finally, voice steadier. "There is much to arrange." They traveled back in silence, but it was no longer the cold silence of earlier. It was warm, threaded with unspoken understanding. Lantern light flickered over his features, revealing lines of exhaustion, but also a quiet letting go, an uncoiling of something long trapped. When they reached the estate, servants hurried forward, shocked by their drenched state. The Duke dismissed them gently, insisting she be attended to first. She refused, stepping closer. "I am not fragile, Your Grace." "No," he said softly, "you are not." She felt the truth of it warm her chest. She followed him into the dimly lit foyer where candlelight pooled across polished floors. Their footsteps echoed in tandem. The storm raged outside, but inside, something calmer took root. He stopped at the foot of the grand staircase. "There is something I must tell you," he said. "Something I had intended to share when the time felt right." She drew closer. "What is it?" He searched her face, his restraint trembling. "I feared marriage because I feared being loved again. Losing my sister taught me that affection gives fate too many ways to wound. But you stand beside me without expectation, without performance, without fear. You do not flatter me, nor shrink before me. You look at me as if I am simply a man. You are, she said. His breath shook. And for the first time in years, I want to be chosen as a man. Her heart fluttered, not with girlish excitement but with a deeper ache, a recognition that something profound had shifted inside him. She stepped nearer, close enough to see droplets clinging to his lashes. I do choose you, she whispered. Not for wealth, not for title, not even for protection. I choose the man who held his uncle's hand as he died. The man who carries kindness like a quiet burden. The man who is stronger in his vulnerability than any whispered rumor. The Duke inhaled sharply, as if her words had struck something unshielded. His hand lifted, hovered near her cheek, then lowered, restraint winning once more. I fear I may come to care for you more than is wise, he murmured. Then let us be unwise together, she said. He let out a broken breath that sounded almost like a laugh, soft, disbelieving, aching. For one fleeting moment, she thought he might kiss her, but instead he reached for her hand, cradling it gently. You have restored something in me, he said. Something I thought lost. Her eyes stung with emotion. And you have shown me what strength truly looks like. Thunder rolled above them, shaking the windows. The candles flickered violently, and a servant rushed in. Your Grace, news from London. Urgent. The Duke straightened. What news? The servant hesitated, glancing uneasily at her. It concerns the gentleman who insulted the lady. He has vanished, under suspicious circumstances. Her breath seized. The Duke's eyes narrowed, darkening with something fierce and unwavering. Prepare the carriage, he ordered. We leave at once. And as she felt his hand tighten around hers, she realized the storm inside the house had only just begun.